The shocking news on Steven Tyler is finally out, and it isn't good. Aerosmith's legendary frontman is facing decades-old lawsuits alleging he assaulted a minor and coerced her into an abortion. The shocking details are finally out, and Tyler has denied it. Here's what's really going on behind the headlines. For 5 decades, Steven Tyler has been the iconic voice and charismatic frontman of Aerosmith, one of rock music's most enduring bands. His powerful vocals, dynamic stage presence, and flamboyant personality have cemented his status as a rock and roll legend, beloved by millions of fans worldwide. But behind the platinum records, sold-out tours, and legendary status, troubling allegations from Tyler's past have emerged through recent legal filings that paint a disturbing picture of his relationships with underage girls in the 1970s. These allegations, long whispered about in rock circles and even alluded to in Tyler's own memoir, have now become the subject of serious legal action that threatens to permanently alter the rock icon's legacy. Under California's Child Victims Act, which temporarily lifted the statute of limitations on decades-old abuse claims, Tyler now faces a lawsuit that brings these long-buried allegations into the public spotlight. The accusations are not merely tabloid gossip or unsubstantiated rumors. They're formal legal claims backed by court documents, historical accounts, and in some cases, Tyler's own published words. Tonight, we examine these shocking allegations against one of rock's most recognizable figures, the legal battles now unfolding, and how these developments are forcing fans and the music industry to reckon with troubling questions about power, consent, and accountability in rock's hedonistic golden era. The lawsuit that shocked the rock world didn't come out of nowhere. The teenage girl, the legendary rock star, and the relationship hidden in plain sight for decades, even in Tyler's own memoir. 1. Civil lawsuit alleging terrible things with a minor. In December 2022, a lawsuit filed in Los Angeles under California's Child Victims Act sent shockwaves through the music industry. The plaintiff, Julia Misley, formerly known as Julia Holcomb, alleged that Steven Tyler assaulted and emotionally abused her beginning in 1973 when she was just 16 years old and he was in his mid-20s, already achieving fame with Aerosmith. The lawsuit's filing was made possible by California legislation that opened a 3-year look-back window, allowing victims of childhood abuse to file claims regardless of when the alleged abuse occurred, temporarily lifting statutes of limitations that would have otherwise prevented such decades-old cases from moving forward. According to court documents and Misley's public statements, she met Tyler after an Aerosmith concert in Portland, Oregon, when a friend who knew someone in the band's circle helped her gain backstage access. What followed, according to the lawsuit, was not a brief encounter, but the beginning of a 3-year relationship characterized by what the filing describes as manipulation, control, and exploitation of a minor. The lawsuit details allegations that are deeply troubling, especially given the significant age and power differential involved, explained a legal expert specializing in abuse cases. The core claim involves a 25-year-old established rock star allegedly engaging in activity with a 16-year-old fan, a scenario that raises serious questions about consent and coercion regardless of the era in which it occurred. What makes this case particularly unusual is that aspects of this relationship weren't entirely hidden. In fact, Tyler himself wrote about a relationship with an underage girl in his 2011 memoir, Does the Noise in My Head Bother You? Though he used the pseudonym Diana rather than Julia's real name, many details aligned with what is now known about his relationship with Misley. In the memoir, Tyler wrote, I almost took a teen bride. Her parents fell in love with me, signed a paper over for me to have custody, so I wouldn't get arrested if I took her out of state. I took her on tour with me. While the memoir presented this relationship through Tyler's romanticized lens, the lawsuit offers a dramatically different perspective, one of alleged exploitation and abuse rather than a rock and roll love story. According to court documents, Tyler allegedly convinced Misley's parents to grant him guardianship over their daughter, giving him legal authority to travel with her across state lines and effectively removing her from her family's protection. The guardianship aspect is particularly concerning from a legal perspective, noted the legal expert. If proven true, it would represent a significant misuse of a legal mechanism intended to protect minors, essentially using it to facilitate continued access to a teenager despite age of consent laws that varied by state. The lawsuit claims that once Tyler had established legal control over Misley through this guardianship, he engaged in a pattern of behavior that involved providing drugs and alcohol to the teenage girl and engaging in activity that, given her age and the circumstances, could not have involved meaningful consent. Associated Press reporting on the case notes that court records confirm these legal proceedings are not merely speculative, but represent formal allegations now working their way through the judicial system. While Tyler has denied wrongdoing through his legal team, the existence of the lawsuit itself and the fact that it has survived initial legal challenges represents a significant development in a story that has long existed on the periphery of rock history. She was 16 when she met him. He was 25. What happened next would lead to pregnancy, alleged coercion, and trauma that haunted her for decades before she finally took legal action. Two, allegations include claims of coercing an abortion. Among the most serious allegations in Julia Misley's lawsuit are claims regarding a pregnancy that resulted from her relationship with Tyler and the circumstances surrounding its termination. According to historical reporting and statements related to the case, Misley became pregnant while traveling with Tyler on tour when she was 17 years old. The lawsuit alleges that when Tyler learned of the pregnancy, his reaction set in motion a series of events that would have profound and lasting consequences. According to Misley's account, which has been reported in multiple news outlets covering the lawsuit, Tyler initially expressed interest in starting a family, but later changed his position dramatically. Misley claims that after a serious apartment fire nearly killed her, Tyler pressured her to terminate the pregnancy despite her wishes to continue it. According to her account, she was hospitalized after the fire, and while still recovering from smoke inhalation, Tyler allegedly insisted on the abortion, leaving her feeling she had no choice in the matter. The allegations regarding the pregnancy and abortion are particularly sensitive aspects of this case, observed a legal analyst familiar with the lawsuit. They involve questions not just of misconduct with a minor, but allegations of reproductive coercion, a form of control that has received increasing recognition in recent years as a serious form of abuse. Misley's account of these events has been consistent in her public statements over many years, well before the filing of the current lawsuit. She has described being deeply traumatized by both the relationship with Tyler and the termination of the pregnancy, which she claims was against her wishes and beliefs. What the legal filings describe is a significant power imbalance that extended to reproductive decisions, noted a psychologist who specializes in trauma related to abuse. When there's already an age and status differential, and one person is legally a minor under another's guardianship, meaningful consent becomes highly questionable, whether regarding activity or major medical decisions. These allegations regarding the pregnancy and abortion have been widely reported in news coverage tied to the lawsuit, appearing in publications ranging from specialized music press to mainstream news outlets. While the allegations themselves remain unproven in court, their inclusion in formal legal filings makes them a matter of public record rather than mere rumor or speculation. The lawsuit seeks to frame these events not as isolated incidents, but as part of an alleged pattern of exploitation and control that began with the initial meeting when Misley was 16 and continued through their approximately 3-year relationship. The legal action portrays the alleged coerced abortion as a particularly traumatic culmination of this dynamic. From a legal standpoint, these allegations involve multiple potential areas of wrongdoing, explained the legal analyst. Beyond the core claims regarding activity with a minor, they touch on questions of informed consent for medical procedures, potential abuse of guardianship, and emotional abuse, creating a complex case that goes far beyond typical claims of misconduct. Tyler's defense? The relationship was consensual, and his rock memoir shouldn't be used against him in court. But with multiple accusers coming forward with similar stories, his legal team faces an uphill battle.
My father's name was Victor Alphonse Tallarico from Calabria. And if I told him...
3. Tyler has denied the allegations. Through his legal representatives, Steven Tyler has consistently denied the allegations contained in Julia Misley's lawsuit. His legal team has mounted a multifaceted defense that challenges both the substance of the claims and the legal mechanisms being used to bring decades-old allegations into court. According to reporting from People magazine and other outlets covering the case, Tyler's attorneys have argued that the relationship between Tyler and Misley was consensual, a defense that will likely face significant scrutiny given Misley's age at the time the relationship began and the alleged power dynamics involved. A particularly interesting aspect of Tyler's legal defense involves his attempt to distance himself from his own published memoir. His legal team has argued that statements in "Does the Noise in My Head Bother You?" should not be admissible as evidence against him, despite the apparent similarities between the relationship he described with Diana and Misley's allegations. This creates an unusual legal scenario where an author is essentially arguing against the reliability of his own published work, noted a media law expert following the case. It's a challenging position to maintain, especially given that memoirs are generally understood to be nonfiction accounts, even allowing for some artistic license. Tyler's legal team has also reportedly challenged the constitutionality of the California Child Victims Act itself, arguing that the law's look-back window unfairly allows for the revival of claims that would otherwise be barred by statutes of limitations. This approach represents a procedural defense that attacks the legal mechanism enabling the lawsuit rather than directly addressing the allegations themselves. Challenging the law itself is a common defense strategy in cases filed under new look-back window statutes, explained a legal analyst. These laws have been enacted in several states specifically to address situations where alleged victims of childhood abuse may have been unable to come forward until well into adulthood, often due to trauma or fear. The constitutionality of such laws continues to be debated in courts across the country. Beyond these formal legal defenses, Tyler has maintained a public silence regarding the specific allegations, neither addressing them in performances nor making statements outside of court filings. This approach aligns with typical legal strategy in high-profile civil cases, where defendants are generally advised to avoid making public statements that could potentially be used against them in legal proceedings. Tyler's defense strategy appears focused on legal and procedural arguments rather than direct public denial, observed the legal analyst. This approach reflects the serious nature of the allegations and the complex legal landscape surrounding decades-old claims of misconduct. People magazine's reporting indicates that the case remains active in the legal system, with both sides continuing to file motions and counter-motions as the litigation progresses toward potential trial or settlement. Tyler's continued denial of the allegations ensures that the ultimate determination of these claims will likely come through the legal system rather than through public admission or acknowledgement. Just as the music industry was processing the first lawsuit, a second woman came forward with eerily similar allegations from the same era. The pattern emerging suggests Tyler's relationship with Misley wasn't an isolated incident. 4. Multiple accusers in separate lawsuits. The legal challenges facing Steven Tyler expanded significantly in November 2023 when a second woman filed a lawsuit alleging assault dating back to the 1970s. This additional legal action, reported by ABC News and other major outlets, has introduced a new dimension to the case by suggesting a potential pattern of behavior rather than an isolated incident. According to court documents, this second plaintiff, who filed anonymously as Jane Doe, alleges that Tyler assaulted her in 1975 in a New York City hotel room when she was 17 years old. The lawsuit claims that Tyler, who would have been approximately 27 at the time, used his fame and status to manipulate the teenager into a situation where the alleged assault occurred. The emergence of multiple accusers with similar allegations from the same time period creates a significantly more challenging legal landscape for Tyler's defense, noted a former prosecutor who specializes in assault cases. While each case must be evaluated on its own merits, courts and juries often find patterns of alleged behavior more compelling than isolated accusations. The second lawsuit was filed under New York's Adult Survivors Act, which, like California's Child Victims Act, created a temporary window allowing victims to file claims that would otherwise be barred by statutes of limitations. This legal mechanism has enabled numerous high-profile cases against powerful figures across various industries, reflecting a broader societal shift toward accountability for past misconduct. The similarities between the two lawsuits against Tyler are striking. Both involve teenage girls allegedly targeted by the rock star at the height of Aerosmith's early fame. Both describe scenarios where Tyler allegedly used his celebrity status to gain access to young fans and then allegedly engaged in activity with them despite their status as minors. And both cases involve allegations from a specific period in the mid-1970s, when Aerosmith was achieving mainstream success but had not yet reached the commercial peak they would attain in later decades. Multiple similar allegations from the same time period can potentially strengthen each individual case, explained the legal expert. They suggest what legal professionals sometimes refer to as a modus operandi, or pattern of behavior, that can make each separate allegation more credible in the eyes of a judge or jury. ABC's reporting indicates that Tyler's legal team has denied the allegations in the second lawsuit as well, maintaining the position that these decades-old claims are being improperly revived through look-back window legislation. However, the existence of multiple lawsuits inevitably complicates the defense strategy and increases both legal and reputational risks. The emergence of a second accuser has also generated renewed media attention to other aspects of Tyler's past that have taken on new significance in light of the current allegations. Music journalists and cultural critics have begun re-examining lyrics, interviews, and the rock culture of the 1970s more broadly, questioning how behavior that was once celebrated or overlooked as part of the rock lifestyle should be evaluated by contemporary standards. These multiple lawsuits represent a significant legal challenge, but they also reflect a broader cultural reckoning with the excesses of rock's past, observed a music historian. Many behaviors that were once dismissed with a wink and nod as rock and roll lifestyle are now being reevaluated through a lens that recognizes power imbalances and questions whether meaningful consent was possible in such scenarios. The rock star and the teenage girl, it wasn't just a cliche, it was the dark reality of 1970s music culture. Tyler's case forces us to confront how behavior once celebrated as rock and roll excess now looks disturbingly like predation.
He's standing right here on the corner of Pennsylvania Avenue and Abbey Road. Do it! Oh, little couch. She came in through the bathroom window.
5. The cultural context. Rock's troubled history with young girls. The allegations against Steven Tyler don't exist in isolation, but reflect a disturbing aspect of rock culture in the 1970s that has increasingly come under scrutiny in recent years: the sexualization and pursuit of teenage girls by adult male rock stars. What was once celebrated, or at least tolerated, as part of rock's rebellious image is now being reassessed as predatory behavior that exploited power imbalances and vulnerable young fans. There was an entire cultural apparatus that normalized and even glamorized sexual relationships between rock stars and younger women during this era, explained a cultural historian who has studied gender dynamics in rock music. Album covers, song lyrics, magazine profiles, and even mainstream films portrayed teenage groupies as willing participants in a liberated sexual culture rather than as minors being exploited by much older, powerful men. This cultural context is relevant to understanding both how such relationships could occur so openly and why it has taken decades for serious legal and social accountability to emerge. Songs about teenage girls were commonplace, with lyrics that openly sexualized them receiving radio play and critical acclaim. Meanwhile, publications like Rolling Stone and Cream occasionally featured profiles of groupies, some underage, without questioning the ethics of their relationships with adult musicians. The rock culture of the 1970s created a perfect storm of risk factors, noted a psychologist specializing in adolescent development. You had incredibly famous, wealthy adult men with tremendous cultural authority encountering adoring teenage fans, often traveling without parental supervision. Add in the ready availability of drugs and alcohol, and the power imbalance becomes almost impossible to overstate. What makes Tyler's case particularly noteworthy in this broader context is that aspects of his relationship with Julia Misley, then Holcomb, weren't completely hidden, but were partially documented in contemporary accounts and later in his own memoir. This reflects how normalized such relationships were, They didn't need to be entirely concealed because they weren't universally recognized as inappropriate at the time. There was a disconnect between legal standards and cultural practices, observed the historian. Even though age of consent laws existed, the enforcement mechanisms around celebrity culture were essentially non-existent. The behavior wasn't secret because there was little expectation of meaningful consequences. This cultural context doesn't excuse individual behavior, but helps explain how such conduct could persist openly for so long. The music industry, media, and fan culture all participated in systems that essentially looked the other way or actively celebrated relationships that would now be recognized as exploitative. The lawsuits against Tyler are part of a broader reassessment of rock's past, explained a music critic. Similar allegations have emerged against numerous iconic musicians from this era, forcing a reevaluation of artists whose work remains culturally significant even as their personal conduct comes under increased scrutiny. This reassessment involves difficult questions about separating artists from their art, about applying contemporary ethical standards to past behavior, and about how to acknowledge harmful patterns while still recognizing cultural contributions. Tyler's case brings these questions into sharp focus, challenging fans and the industry to confront uncomfortable truths about rock's history. What's changing isn't just legal accountability, but cultural memory, observed the historian. Stories once told as rock and roll excess are being retold as accounts of exploitation and abuse. This shift in narrative represents a significant cultural reckoning with power, gender, and consent in popular music.